Walthamstow is one of the biggest pilots for active travel that there's been in this country, certainly in modern times. 10 years of sustained investment to show what happens when you make a place more livable, make it easy to cycle and walk to schools, shops and workplaces, and they've proved that it works. Nearly 30% up on cycling, 20% on cycling, 30% on walking. It's like a quarter of all tube journeys in London. The sustained investment in London has resulted in, and they've proved the case. And it's not been easy. So they've really led the way, had some hard fights to get this in, and they've made a nicer place to live.
In Waltham Forest, definitely you can see that much more families cycling to school together. Cargo bikes is the way to go for that, really, isn't it? And I think we've got the infrastructure, it feels safe. We have school streets. I think we have 22 school streets now in the borough, which really help that, you know, that modal shift.
So Walthamstow's in northeast London. It's kind of sort of northeast of Hackney.
I think unless you were a quite robust male, you wouldn't really cycle around. It was quite an aggressive place to be cycling. It wasn't particularly friendly, and it was challenging, and you couldn't necessarily get to where you wanted to go in a way that you wanted to go without perhaps getting a little bit wound up maybe. So it encouraged so many more people to get in their cars and do, in particular, those short journeys. And if you were a pedestrian, well, you know, you had some basic, you know, traditional infrastructure, pavements, but actually because of the nature of vehicle ownership, because of the nature of car ownership in particular, then it was it wasn't a particularly friendly place for pedestrians neither, and it certainly didn't encourage you to perhaps walk a little bit further, or to think, actually I don't need to jump in the car to get to B, I could actually walk it. You know, you were probably more default, I'll get in my car. You know, we've put in the cycling and walking infrastructure that has unlocked and enabled more people to feel comfortable and feel safe to walk and cycle.
So, you know, doing that isn't this kind of big, crazy, amazing kind of dream idea. It's a simple approach to town planning and to active travel that's been done for decades in, you know, the Netherlands, and increasingly it's been done all over France, Germany, and all sorts of places.
I'm currently in North London in the borough of Walthamstow, and I'm here with my dad, and he invited me along to come and check out the bike paths they have here that they've created over the last 10 years.
Well, it's to celebrate the 10 years of Enjoy Waltham Forest.
Yeah, I'm John Little. I'm a transport consultant, and I helped Waltham Forest with the original bid. 10-year anniversary for some, more like 12-year anniversary for me. The original plan, and again where I think the Waltham Forest Mini Holland stands above the others, to be truthful, is it was a combination of things. The idea was it was that beautiful kind of scenario of putting the infrastructure in and providing the complementary measures and the behaviour change and everything else. So the actual complete plan, the idea was a world-class cycle commuter route across the borough, a network of excellent cycle routes. It was actually a big public realm scheme in the town centre, which actually we kind of replaced with the idea for the villages, as I said, which I put together based on the fact that actually talking to the officers, there was real issues with mainly road safety and you know, rat running and the like in the residential streets around the centre of Walthamstow. And then there were cycle hubs at stations. Again, the importance of somewhere like Walthamstow, which isn't in the centre of London, people being able to do those shorter journeys, lock their bike up, and then carry on public transport. And then, as I say, behaviour change, cycle hangers, cargo bikes, cycle training, money for community groups to get involved in the project and do things themselves. And again, I mean, I suppose that is what really I think the whole thing is about. It's about enabling other people to make that change. It's not about, I mean, it is about changing the organisation, it's about changing the streets out there, but then it's about letting people get on and change the way they move around.
Hello, I'm Chris Boardman, the Cycling and Walking Commissioner for England and also the Chairman of Sport England. Walthamstow, Waltham Forest the Mini Holland schemes, as they were when they started 10 years ago here, have created examples that councillors and decision makers from across the country can literally come and see, feel and touch. They can speak to every part of the process that made that happen, and that's what makes this so special. It hasn't been here for years and years. They're not starting the journey and projecting what's going to happen. In a 10-year time frame, they've done it, all of that process, and the learning is here for an entire nation to take advantage of. London is so densely populated that if you can do it here, if you can reallocate road space, if you can change the way people travel here, you can do it anywhere in the country, and it's desperately needed elsewhere, particularly in places that haven't got the public transport offer that they have here. Birmingham, Greater Manchester, all of these areas, all of these conurbations could do exactly what's happened here if the political will is there to do it. I walked to the event today just from the station, and I just watched what was happening around me. And the reason I know they're winning here is there isn't any more cyclists. They're just people in normal clothes doing normal things, going about their day. From every background, from ethnicity, rich and poor, everybody is just getting around, and they just happen to be doing it without cars, and that is what we're aiming for. Children with transport independence and parents getting their kids to school, just not having to do it in a car.
I'm Simon Monk. I am the Head of Campaigns and Community Development at the London Cycling Campaign. So we go back to 2006. I was a consumer journalist, but I was also a volunteer. I've always been a community campaigner for some degree or another. I helped save a cinema in Walthamstow. I was involved in anti-roads protests at one point, but around 2006 I started volunteering for the Waltham Forest cycling campaign, which at that point I didn't even know was part of London Cycling Campaign. It's like one of the local borough branches, and I started getting fed up with the state of roads, the way things were designed for in Waltham Forest. So that culminated in about 2007-2008 with a thing called Movers and Shakers, where I got the council leader, who was in his 60s at the time, out on a bike. He rode down the Lea Bridge Road with me. I had the deputy leader, Clyde Lokes, who's here today, out on a bike with me, and various council officers. And that kind of, I think, started the process that then led to the 2012 Olympic action plan, and from that the Mini Holland bid, and from that the Mini Holland programme, and from that the rest is kind of history, I guess.
My name's Will Norman, I'm London's Walking and Cycling Commissioner. But the changes that have happened in this neighbourhood have benefited tens of thousands of people's lives in this neck of the woods. You only have to come here, you'll see kids cycling to school, walking around. I was cycling around last night. People are out in the street, communities enjoying themselves. It's what a city should be like. If we want to tackle climate change, chronic disease, every social challenge, we need to design our cities for people. And Waltham Forest have done it here in the Mini Holland scheme in this area. And what's been brilliant has been the procession of leaders from other cities around the UK, other cities around the world, campaigners, politicians, you name it, they've been here. Waltham Forest is now synonymous with how you want to design your city for the future, and that is echoing out way beyond the UK, all over the world, and it's inspiring a whole movement, I would say, of urban planners and people who really care about tackling the big issues of our day. You cannot make changes like what we've seen here in Waltham Forest without political leadership, and that political leadership is required at every level. Now, we have seen that in Waltham Forest with spades. Yep, you can see that with Clyde Lokes, who has been an absolute legend in pursuing this. But it also needs to happen at a city level. And one of the things that my boss Sadiq Khan and Boris Johnson both agree on, probably the only thing as far as I can see, is that London needs to do better, and cycling, more walking, more cycling is absolutely key to that. So I think the success of this scheme has been dependent on the leadership at a local level, yep, but it's also been dependent on leadership at a city level, both through Boris Johnson's administration, but also through the last 8 years of Sadiq Khan.
Hi, my name is Mariam Draya. I'm the CEO of Joyriders Britain. Joyriders is a bikeability provider, a social enterprise, a community group. We started out doing social bike rides for women, which we still do, but we also do a lot of training for families because we want families to take up cycling together. We noticed that when children do bikeability in school, they still don't tend to cycle. But yeah, by training the parents, you get them to cycle because the parents see that it's actually safe to do. I think in the last years there was really an explosion of cargo bikes, I like to say. I think there are more cargo bikes on the market, so definitely there's more of a market for it. But in Waltham Forest, definitely you can see that much more families cycling to school together. Cargo bikes is the way to go for that, really, isn't it? And I think we've got the infrastructure. It feels safe. We have school streets. I think we have 22 school streets now in the borough, which really help that, you know, that modal shift which people take up.
Hi, I'm Paul Gasson. I've been an active travel campaigner in London since the late 80s. I live in Waltham Forest. In fact, I live in Walthamstow Village, which was where the kind of Mini Holland programme first started to bite in terms of infrastructure being installed. Well, just in my own street, which was a rat run, we had vehicles doing 30 miles an hour, kind of high-speed vehicles, a lot of them, 100 an hour plus. It was pretty unpleasant getting down that street. Lot parking, very narrow footways. Now it's been filtered at one end. Well, in fact, the whole street's been filtered in multiple places, and the main difference is everybody walks on the road, and that is just really cool. It's completely changed the nature of the street, how people interact. People are no longer carrying on the pavements, trying to jump across junctions to avoid speeding cars. The whole place is really very much community, place oriented.
How did you get the ball rolling on getting all of this to how it is today?
Well, it wasn't just me. There were a lot of people involved, but I guess myself and Simon Monk really started the changes back probably heading for a good 15 years ago, talking to key politicians and senior officers to kind of talk about actually the potential. And I came in a couple of years later and we started to develop a vision of what we wanted to see, of how life could be so radically different if we were to reallocate space away from parked and moving motor vehicles, what we could really do to civilise our communities, make streets places which are fit for kids to roam in, unaccompanied. Building that sense of community, that sense of this is a place I live, not just a place I sleep and I drive through and the rest of it. So that was that beginning of starting to work with kind of key decision makers, particularly Clyde Lokes, who was really up for some really, really big challenges, and he made that very clear early on. The kind of normal tweaking of junctions to kind of make it slightly safer for cyclists really wasn't an option given the growing tide of car use and the dangers and the casualties we're seeing. And Clyde was saying, we've got to do better. I'm up for delivering much more serious change, and we were really lucky that conversations were happening, and they came up with a really ambitious plan for improving conditions for cyclists. And then a couple of years later, we're having those conversations with Clyde and with serious senior officers around really making a difference as things were starting to happen. And then Transport for London announced the opportunities to bid for Mini Holland funding, which were really big infrastructure projects, really big behaviour change opportunities, and that was something where Clyde just said, we've got to go for this. It's like, yes, of course, and you got the ambition, you got the officer capability in place, and that made all the difference. To have those, as been mentioned earlier today, the key ingredients being have political will, the determination to make a difference and to do it, not just to step down when things get challenging, the officer capability, that commitment to doing things differently, and having good community support, campaigners and people on the ground who think, yeah, life could be better. Let's support councillors, let's support officers in actually helping to deliver a much nicer environment for us.
Have you seen a lot of difference in the support for the project now compared to the start?
Understandably, I think what was interesting was the original TfL bid is that you've got £27 million and you only got 3 years to deliver it, from conceptual through to actually on the ground delivery. That meant we rushed those early stages, particularly around engagement. We didn't have the expertise in place, we didn't have the time to engage properly, so of course we got quite a big backlash. People were scared because it's just a big change, and a lot of people hadn't asked for it. And if you're driving a car, naturally, if you're going to start filtering roads and things like that, yes, of course it's going to affect your journey in some way, so people were naturally very suspicious. Why are you doing this? What's the benefit for me? So we're tending to get the people who were going to be perhaps a little bit inconvenienced getting really worried about this, and it did create quite a big pushback.
And a coffin getting taken down the street.
Sorry?
And a coffin getting taken down the
Yeah,
street.
well, I mean, yes, that was a kind of seminal point where all of these tensions built up, and we had a massive protest when we opened that first section, Alpen Road. We had that kind of first low traffic neighbourhood went live, formal opening of Alpen Road, yes, and we had some local people who were really deeply unhappy, and they made their feelings felt, and it was actually quite an uncomfortable event. But we went through that. The council didn't back down, said no, we've got to do more of this. There's some really good fundamentals underpinning what we're trying to do in terms of quality of life, in terms of health, in terms of trying to create a better world for our residents. So I think that, just having that sheer determination not to back down, say no, we know this is the right thing to do. There will always be some vocal opponents to change. I think that showed real guts. But officers as well had quite a tough time at times. They had some really difficult engagement sessions, again because things were particularly at the beginning very pushed. We didn't have the skills in place to engage in the way perhaps that we do now. We were leading in terms of big infrastructure change. No one else had done stuff like this for generations, really, and not in the way that we were doing it. So yeah, there's a huge amount of learning in those first couple of years, pretty tough. Now I think we've learned a lot more. The council's far smarter about how they engage, using lots of different tools. We've seen commonplace, engagement workshops, all sorts of stuff where people really have a chance to say, I like the idea in principle, but I'm really worried about this, or no, I don't like this at all. And if you can have those conversations and you allow people to say, this is what I don't like about it. If you allow them to feel heard, then they may then start to feel like, okay, I've been heard. Maybe the council can make a few changes here and there, and they can start to say, well, perhaps it's not as bad after all because I've been heard about the things I'm worried about, and I can start to move in my own sense emotionally along this path and say, actually, it may not be ideal for me, but I can see the bigger picture. I can see the benefits for my neighbours, for their kids, or whatever it might be. Well, I'm involved in Extinction Rebellion and various other kind of climate and other groups, but what I really love is, my day job is to be a cargo bike rider. I work for Zedify, the Zedify bike trike's just there, and I get to use the infrastructure which we campaign for and which the council so beautifully built. I get to use it every single day of my working day, so I'm a lucky bunny because I've been campaigning for this. I believe it's really important, and now I get to ride it.
I'm Councillor Clyde Lokes, and I'm the Deputy Leader of the London Borough Waltham Forest. Briefly, in the last 10 years, we've built loads of stuff. We've put in the cycling and walking infrastructure that has unlocked and enabled more people to feel comfortable and feel safe to walk and cycle to the places that they want to go, whether it's just a simple school trip in the morning and in the afternoon, or to the local shops. They feel a lot more comfortable in walking and cycling, especially with their young children as well. They don't feel the need to grab on, hold on to tiny little hands. They feel a lot more comfortable in allowing their children to kind of run to the end of the road, or even in many instances, because we have so many school streets now, just run, scoot, wheel down the road, because they know it's a safe place. And because we've been at this for 10 years, even those people that are still driving in and around Waltham Forest, they know the kind of nature of the place now. They know it's a place that really encourages a lot more people to walk and cycle. So you've got a kind of degree of greater driver respect for those people who are using active travel modes to kind of get around the borough. And of course our complementary measures, lots of cycle training. If you live, work or study here, you can get your free cycle training. You can learn in family groups, you can learn just with a group of women. You can do your traditional cycling training at school. Our cycle hangers, our cycle hubs, all things that just unlock that potential and just make it so much easier for people to take active travel as the norm.
Clyde, people like you get death threats and abuse, etc. But do you also get people who might have been on an opposing side a few years ago, now come up to you, shake your hand and say, Clyde, I was wrong, this is wonderful, we can hear bird song, we can get around. Do you get the positive stuff too?
Yeah, you get some instances of people that have been convinced, and they've been convinced because civilization didn't collapse when we put in some modal filters in a particular neighbourhood. They're convinced because actually you know, they can see kids out in the street playing now, you know, and that is a sign of civilization. That children, our most vulnerable of citizens, feel safe and content to be outdoors. They're convinced because actually, you know, reluctantly they did get themselves onto a cycle training course, and they did then buy a bike through a salary sacrifice scheme, and they are now cycling, and actually, you know, they've had a family now as well, and they've adapted their bike to take their small children on their bike. And so, you know, you're seeing all of those things. But I always say that the vast majority of people have always been neutral in this space. You know, you get your evangelical exponents of wanting all of this stuff, and then you get your evangelical, very angry people that say, no, this cannot be happening, this is an infringement of our human rights. But the vast majority of people sit in the middle, and they just want to be convinced. And if they like it, and who wouldn't like it? You know, seeing all those thousands of vehicle movements a day taken out of their residential streets, you know, listening to the bird song, seeing the trees grow, you know, having local shops that are thriving because people feel safe in just hanging around in those particular destinations and those environments. So yes, people have crossed over and now kind of sit with us, but always, vast majority of people were always neutral in this space, and we've convinced them. The amount of cargo bikes that we now see, you know, in this, you know, 10 years ago, I didn't even know really what a cargo bike was. But now, you know, you're just seeing them all the time. You're seeing, you know, families being transported, you're seeing materials being transported, you're seeing services being delivered via a huge range of different kind of cargo bikes and adapted bikes. And to me, that suggests, you know, some great progress. But the other thing here is bike shops. I mean, bike shops have boomed in Waltham Forest, but of course, when you think about it, you know, if there's more bikes here, if there's more people cycling regularly, then those bikes are going to need to be serviced. They're going to need inner tubes being bought. They're going to need, you know, people are going to need new helmets, and as they have children and families, those children are going to need bikes, and they're going to need helmets. And as we know, children grow through bikes quite quickly from their kind of balance bikes through to perhaps when they're 13, 14, when they get onto a kind of proper adult sized bike. So, you know, there is that kind of boom.
I started with my business 2 years ago, but I'm on bike business like 16 years in London. So I remember the time when there was no cycle lane.
Yeah, my name's Lee Gravener. I'm from Velocity Transport Planning, and we're doing a tour of Waltham Forest, looking at the Mini Holland infrastructure and subsequent improvements they've made in terms of improving active travel around the borough. And the people who've just walked off into the distance are on the study tour that I'm also on. They're council officers from all over the country. There's Active Travel England representatives there, some London boroughs, a couple of other transport planners like myself. Consultants, but yeah, all sorts. Really interesting mix, coming to learn best practice. I used to work for Kingston Borough Council, Kingston upon Thames, 10 years ago. One of the 3 Mini Holland boroughs in London, so it was Enfield, Waltham Forest, Kingston, all got funding to make innovation, make a step change in terms of active travel in their boroughs. And Kingston doesn't get talked about very much, but they did do, unlike Waltham Forest, it focused a lot on the villages and like the filtering of streets to make it more pleasant to cycle and walk along. Kingston did a lot more main routes kind of infrastructure, like super highways I'd call them, going from the Kingston sort of town centre towards London and other sort of connected areas. But they're still yet to finish some of those routes.
And the obvious question, I mean, every time I come, there seems to be more people on bikes. So the obvious question is that hunch of mine, is that when I keep on coming back and seeing more people, is that correct? And we are seeing a step change.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I've not looked at all the data. I'd say, yeah, there's definitely more people cycling and different types of people, I'd say, as well. I mean, I've lived in London for 15 years or so, and when I started, it was all road cyclists, couriers, sort of the mammals, I hate to use the term, but you know, people who we're trying to get quickly around. But you just see a lot more normal cycling. I'd call it, utilitarian cycling, utility cycling. Yeah, and I think that's really nice to have that mix. I've just come back from Paris, and it was it felt the same. I was at Paris again 10 years ago, and coming back last weekend, it's completely changed. And just by that infrastructure and having those safe routes and a network, it seems to have attracted all sorts of people to cycling, which is what the argument's always made. But seeing the proof on the ground, it's
And on Lee Bridge Road, there just seemed to be a steady procession of guys on cargo bikes. I mean, literally every minute there was another guy on a cargo bike in a yellow fluoro vest, and you're thinking, is that the same guy? It's like, no, these are different guys. And it's all vroom, vroom, vroom.
Yeah.
So there's clearly businesses have been set up to be, carting stuff around, and they're using the cycleways.
Yeah, I mean, I another previous job, I used to work for Pedal Me for 3 years. I know you know Ben and done interviews with him. And there's actually a National Cargo Bike Summit just gone on Friday, where I think in London you're in a bubble, obviously, always, but you're right, there's loads of businesses now using cargo bikes. I've done cargo bike promotion projects in previous jobs, and you get a real variety, but you kind of want to see the big players using cargo bikes more. So I know Royal Mail were at the summit talking about their use of cargo bikes. You've got Every who started using cargo bikes. I think they've talked about tipping points. You need to see more of those big fleets, van fleets, using the cargo bikes in London, because it does still feel a lot of the couriers haven't managed to scale as quickly, and Pedal Me was a great example, not scaling as quickly as they'd hoped, and picking up that sort of core logistics work that goes on all over the world. They hadn't got into that chain yet. So I mean, there are more cargo bikes around, but I'd like to see even more.
Waltham strategic director of accounts, strategic accounts director. This job 2 years.
But the previous one?
Previous job 33 years.
With the council?
With the council.
And so, would I be right in saying that you were the person who was the first person to get the bid and run with it?
I was the lead officer submitting the bid, and then we were successful running the show for the first 8 years. Waltham Forest is a council that's made of Walthamstow, Chingford, Leighton and Leytonstone. The initiative was started with the TfL. Boris Johnson was the mayor, and therefore he invited all the outer London boroughs to submit the bid. There's about 18 councils. I think they all submitted it, and the outset they said it will be maximum up to 3 awards. Therefore we were one of the 3 who were successful at the end.
And I've seen a few different amounts. You can tell me which is the correct one. I've seen 27 million and I've seen 30 million as the amounts that were awarded. So what was the actual award, and why do you sometimes see those differences?
Right, the total budget was £100 million for the 3 boroughs, and the Waltham Forest is the one got lowest amount, 27 million. And the other boroughs have 30 million or slightly different.
Oh, they got more than you.
Yes.
And yet, when we were doing a cycle tour around, that Simon Monk said go here, there and everywhere, and we did, we saw one of the study groups coming around, and I've been on previous study groups. So basically, Waltham Forest gets lots of study groups from around the world coming here. So it would be fair to say that you were the best at spending that money, because you're the poster child.
I think there's a number of reasons for it, because our bid was a very good bid. I think we had a long-term vision and ambitions. That's another reason we are here on the year 10, because we didn't look at short-term, we looked at long-term, I think initially 5 years and then 10 years. Therefore, and then we had right governance and procedures in place, and then we delivered quite a lot over the last 8 years. That's why everybody is coming, because they were able to see the difference it's made to the borough.
And one of the differences, and one of the things I've always been impressed with, you go to other cities. I'm not just talking about London boroughs here, I'm just talking about other cities and towns in the UK, and when a local authority is either thinking of or doing it, putting in a cycleway network, it's behind the scenes, it's behind the streets, it's behind the shops. It's almost get rid of the cyclists, put them over there, whereas what you've got here in Waltham Forest is you have those backstreet cycleway networks, but you've also absolutely laced the main roads with the cycleways, which is super impressive and different.
When we obviously looked at the bid back in 2013, we were looking at it as a whole borough, not just putting this few cycle lane here or there. We're trying to put the plan how we can get Waltham Forest changed like Holland. That's where the Mini Holland come from. Therefore, when we come up with the initial plan, we looked at what we need as a superhighway. People going from one borough to another borough. That's the Lee Bridge Road. One of the scheme joining from Hackney to Red Bridge. The other one is from Harringay to Red Bridge. Therefore, Lee Bridge Road is completed from one end to other. The Forest Road, the second one, we are working on it. Then the next stage, once you have the main road sorted out for people to cycle for work and other things, then we wanted to look at the town centres. People live locally, they wanted to go to the town centres. Therefore, we wanted to develop the town centres. Therefore, our program included town centres. Then once you look at the town centres, then we come up with another area of work, villages, which is the Over Road, Walthamstow village comes into it. The people live locally, we want them to enjoy the surrounding. Therefore, if we make it easy for them to walk, not necessarily cycle, then we are taking the cars away. That's where the villages come from. And the third one, in order for people to do all of them, we need to have a complementary measures that things will support them, like a cycle training. Where can they park the cycle? And bringing the BME into it, and then minority people, how we get them? How do we get the women into it? But now, obviously, that's overtaken. A lot of women are cycling, and there's a women's cycle sisters. There's something born in Waltham Forest. Therefore, our program, even though we put a £30 million bid, I think, if I remember right, initially our estimate was about 55 million. Therefore, we didn't say we only got 30 million, we are going to chuck the remainder of the work. What we had is, we had a plan. This is what we wanted to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years. Then we went ahead and trying to get the funding from various sources in order to move the program going. I think over the first 8 years, we spent well over £100 million related to walking, cycling and sustainable transport, even though we had only 27 million to start with TfL. Therefore, because we were good at delivering, people were happy and enjoying the scheme, TfL were helpful to identify more money, and then we work with the other developers within a borough trying to get the funding from it. I think this is where the leadership and management comes into it. Clive and me, we work extremely well over the last, I know him for 14 years, I work with him, but when the Mini Holland, obviously successful in the Mini Holland, I think our working relationship will completely change. I think is without both sides working together, the political side and the officers, you won't be able to get things done. And in order to get things done, you need to make sure the governance are in place from day one. Because there's some authorities, you need to go to the members every 5 minutes to get the permissions. But in Waltham Forest, outside of the Mini Holland, we put the procedures in place, gone to the cabinet and the members and said, this is our plan for future years, and this is how we are going to deliver the Mini Holland, and this is how we are going to make decisions. Therefore, we ask the members and the cabinet to delegate the authority to the lead member, which is Clyde, and the officers. Therefore, most of the day-to-day decisions were made between the officers and Clyde. That made a big difference. And a lot of other councils, the reasons they are struggling, because that joint working with the members and the officers.
So Clyde was one of the people who was at the protest in 2015 for when Orford Road was opened, when Ambassador Smits from the Netherlands came to open it, and there was a coffin, 60 people, 70 people protesting, saying this was going to be the death of Walthamstow Village. Was it the death of Walthamstow Village? Did you kill off the borough?
No, because I was there on the day, because I was the architect of the Over Road scheme, and I think obviously, the people weren't happy with it, and that was a silent minority, but they were raising the voice, bigger voice. and I think we're trying to reason it out, reason to explain them. And I think now they love the scheme. If you go and ask the people, can we revert back off a road, answer will be no.
Wouldn't it be fantastic if everywhere had the dense network of cycleways and footways and stuff for pedestrians and cyclists that Walthamstow has got?